In this video, I'm going to show you how to get your podcast in Spotify. Before I show you how to do that, I want to tell you why you should consider getting your podcast into Spotify. Firstly, Spotify is a massive service with millions of listeners. It has over 60 million paying subscribers, 140 million active users in 60 markets around the world. So Spotify is a great opportunity to reach a new audience and grow your podcast even faster. There are a couple of things you're going to need to do this. Firstly, you need to make sure that all the music you're using in your podcast is pod safe. In simple terms, that means you have a license or permission from the owner to use that music in your podcast. Secondly, you need to have a Libsyn hosting account. In other words, your podcast should be hosted on Libsyn. If you're not currently using Libsyn, then this video isn't for you. But if you are, then let me show you how easy it is to go ahead and add your podcast into Spotify. Once you've logged into your Libsyn account, just go to Destinations and click Add New. Now, you should see a new external destination here for Spotify. Just click the Add button. And then go ahead here and fill out this form. Now, Libsyn recommends that you complete all the fields in this form just to be on the safe side. Also, there is the important notice here about making sure that your music is using pod-safe content. And if you want some more information about that, you can click this link right here and read more about that. So you're going to go through and select up to 3 categories. Make sure that you have at least one, but it's a good idea to fill all 3 out. You're going to enter a subtitle for your podcast, summary, and the author, which is the host of the podcast. The default language is set to English. Set the content rating, whether it's clean or explicit. And then it's also recommended that you add some keywords separated by a comma. And then finally add the owner name and email so the team at Spotify can get in touch with you if necessary. There are a couple of limitations that you should be aware of. Firstly, the summary field here should be a maximum of 385 characters. So make sure that you're not using any more than 385 characters. This might cause some problems with getting your podcasts approved into Spotify. Also, your title should be 43 characters or less. And if you may have a much longer title in iTunes, and that's okay. But for Spotify, you need to override that. And you can do that by coming to the advanced section here. Just expand that. And here you can type the new title just for Spotify, making sure that it's 43 characters or less. Now, that is not going to affect what shows up in iTunes or your other destinations. So once you've done all that, you're going to check the approve box here. To confirm that you've read the Spotify terms of service, and then you're going to click save. And that's it. Your podcast will now show up in Spotify once it's approved. Now, it may take a few days to a couple of weeks to show up in Spotify, and they won't notify you. You'll need to check yourself, and make sure you do this on the mobile Spotify client, as the desktop app may just be showing you your podcast information from iTunes, which doesn't necessarily mean that your podcast is in Spotify. There are a couple of other things I wanted to show you. Libsyn will, by default, take the same content that you're publishing to iTunes and get that published to Spotify. But there may be some cases where you don't want to do that. For example, maybe you might have 1 or 2 episodes where you're not sure if the music is pod safe and you want to exclude that. And so you can do that by going to the destinations, you'll now see Spotify there as well. Select content, and there you'll see a list of all your episodes, and you can deselect the ones that you don't want to show in Spotify. And the second thing is that Libsyn will also provide Spotify stats for you, but they're not going to show up where you see all the other stats for the other destinations. So typically you'd come down to stats here and you'd say show stats. Well, that's not going to include the Spotify numbers. You're going to see that down here. There's a new menu option that'll appear for the Spotify information. And this is only available to you if you have an advanced account. If you're on the basic plan, you should still be able to get your podcast into Spotify, but you won't see any stats. Also, the Spotify stats are not included in your main Libsyn download numbers that you see here under Show Stats. So you'll need to add the numbers from here with the numbers that you see from Spotify stats to get a more accurate picture of the total number of downloads that you have. And that's how you get your podcast into Spotify. I hope you found this video useful. And if you did, please do me a favor and share it. And if you haven't already signed up, if you'd like to get more podcasting tips, then sign up at prestopod.com.